pleased to present Austin Faith Dialogue, brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries. In the weeks ahead, you will see these and other programs by various denominations.
Many well-intentioned people say, why are there so many groups within Christianity? Today on Austin Faith Dialogue, we're going to talk about elements of unity within the Christian faith. Stay with us and join us for this edition of Austin Faith Dialogue.
This is Austin Faith Dialogue, a public affairs program discussing the important crossroad of religion in life, produced by Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTBC TV. Austin Faith Dialogue highlights the interaction of the religious community with the social and cultural issues throughout our area. Now, today's edition of Austin Faith Dialogue.
Welcome to this edition of Austin Faith Dialogue. I'm Carl Gronberg, the host of the program, and we're glad you're with us because today we're going to talk with three Christians about elements of unity that bring together their particular groups into a praise of God and to service of people. I'd like you to meet today Ray Kaiser, who's pastor of Northwest Hills United Methodist Church, Kinley Lang, who is the choir director at Covenant Presbyterian, and Father Jim McCabe from St. Austin's Parish here in Austin. All three of you are involved in interesting expressions of unity within the Austin community regarding the Christian faith, and you have interesting background and history. But Kinley, particularly you have had an experience of unity by taking the Covenant Presbyterian Choir this past summer over to Estonia, one of the Baltic states. Tell us a little bit about that. How does it happen that Covenant Presbyterian sends their choir to Estonia?
Well, of all the places that you would take a choir, that wouldn't be the first place you would think of. However, Estonia does have a very, very strong choral tradition and background, and it worked well for us to be there. The connection was through a man in our church, Kim Williams. He's an architectural engineer, and his specialty is historic restoration. And he's involved in some restoration projects in Tallinn, the capital of Estonia, including the church where we sang. And he's become friends with the pastors of that church, and that was our connection, and that's how we ended up there.
We understand that the people in Estonia have been under a lot of difficult times because of the presence of the Soviet Union, and now with the fall of the Soviet Union, they're interested in receiving materials. You not only sang, you brought some humanitarian needs to them, right?
That's right. We made a trip earlier before the choir went to determine what their needs were, or at least their needs that we could meet, and we uncovered a number of them. They're very short of medical supplies. They're very short of literature for church education, music, Bibles, commentaries, and that sort of thing. So we put a lot of effort into rounding up as many things as we could to take them, which included about $40,000 worth of pharmaceuticals that were donated to us from various companies and medical concerns. I think we're about 25 crates of medical supplies. And there were actually folks waiting in hospitals on surgery for these supplies to arrive. So it had a sense of urgency to it, and we were proud to have been able to do it.
I like the idea of service, that you had reached out with service, and then you go and you bring your choir and you sing. You flew from here to Stockholm, you told me, and then from Stockholm you took a ferry across to Estonia. And when you arrived in Estonia, what was the experience? Do you speak their language? How did that go?
We don't speak their language. Very few. There are only 1.5 million Estonians in the whole world. And so almost no one except Estonians speak Estonian. Fortunately, they're a little more urbane than we are, and a lot of them speak English. So through interpreters and those who could speak English, we were able to manage really fairly easily. It did have a sense of being a long way from Texas. The appearance of it is very different, the culture is very different, and it was really very exciting to set foot on their shore.
Tell us about the worship experience, the sense of unity that was, the energy, as you mentioned before, about that experience.
The Christian faith in Estonia is re-emerging, actually, after really more than 50 years of occupation, first by the Nazis and then by Russia. And under both of those occupations, the practice of faith Christianity was not allowed. So there is a new freedom, and as a result, a freshness and an energy in the expression of their faith that we don't see much in our work. I mean, we feel our faith and we live it, but that excitement that you see there is not common to us, and it did a world of good for us to see.
I want for us to put up on the screen the picture of the church building where you and the choir sang. Now, I notice there are some instruments also in the picture.
Right.
Tell us about that group.
Well, in order to feel unified with the folks in Estonia that we sang with, it was our idea to have the instrumentalists, the orchestra that accompanied our choir, be Estonians. So in the trip that we took earlier to set up make the arrangements, we hired instrumentalists, violinists, oboe players, trumpet players, everybody who were Estonians, local folks, and most of them play in the Estonian National Orchestra, and they accompanied us in our concert.
In the picture that the Austin Faith Dialogue people are looking at right now, the viewers, they see the instrumentalist, but in the background we see also a picture of the crucifixion. Tell us about that picture.
Well, that's one of the few objects of value, objects of art, that was left in the church when the Russians left Estonia. They took with them brass ornaments, candlesticks, everything of value that they could detach from the building and basically strip this beautiful cathedral. That one piece of artwork that you see behind the choir there was left, and I don't know why, but thank goodness it was, and remains as a testament to that church.
Maybe what we can talk on Austin Faith Dialogue today about, they took everything but that which was truly of value.
That's right. That's right.
And they left behind that which is really our sense of unity. And that's what brought you together over there. That you said there in the newspaper article, the emotional experience of having that human unity as people of faith. Could you just talk with our viewers a little bit about that?
Well, those Christians in Tallinn have been sustaining their faith under such hardship for so many years that for all of a sudden to have the freedom to worship and sing and pray as they now do is really almost overwhelming to them. And then to have a choir from another country come and join them was an experience that they haven't had, and was new, and was very emotional for them, and of course for us as we observed them. And there were moments when we were unable to sing. We had to just stop, back up, and start over after we kind of regained our composure.
I want to talk with you more in the program about that whole sense of unity that we experience through the worship, through the emotions, through the freedom that the Estonians taught you, and how you were touched and changed by that. Jim, you've been in the Austin community, going now from the worldwide scene of Kinley and his choir, going from Austin, Texas to Estonia. You've been here about 3 years at St. Austin's.
Yes.
You're a part of the Austin Metropolitan Ministries Inter-Christian Dialogue group. Tell us a little bit about Jim McCabe and where you come from and where you're raised, and what are some of the sense you have of Christian unity?
Well, I guess in my own time I've seen a tremendous change. I grew up in New York City, and I can remember an incident as a child going downtown West 45th Street in the Theater District, and there's a St. Mary's Church, and going in with my mother, and statues, confessionals, all the things. But suddenly my mother realized that it was not Roman Catholic, but Episcopalian. And I can remember her grabbing me by the hand and pulling me out so quickly. And to contrast that experience as a child with the later experience of sharing with other ministers of other churches, especially, I guess my first experience of that was when I was in Baltimore, and there was formed the what we call Central Churches of Baltimore, which were the kind of historic churches of downtown Baltimore. And we did a lot together in terms of, we did have common worship. We had an adult education program during Lent. We began a program for couples who were entering interfaith marriage. And it was just that sense of, when we really got to talk with one another, realizing there was so much more that we had together than separated us.
As you've seen the changes that have gone on between the groups within the Christian faith, going from the time when Mama says, no, no, son, you can't go into that church building, to the time of where you were cooperating with clergy of other denominations within Christianity, we've seen a type of ebb and flow of the entire ecumenical Christian movement. Where do you think we are today?
Well, I think we're kind of on a plateau, to be very honest. I think there was a kind of an excitement when you talk about the Christians in Estonia having that excitement. I think, you know, certainly from the Roman Catholic tradition in that period immediately following the Second Vatican Council, when a lot of the walls kind of crumbled and there was greater cooperation with the other Christian churches, there was all that excitement of things that we had never done before, and coming to that realization of how much we had in common rather than what divided us. And I think some of that excitement has waned, as it were. And perhaps, I don't know that, I don't think we've gone backwards, certainly. It's just that we've kind of accepted and taken for granted now a lot of the things that, divided us before.
Maybe we're at a place where we're kind of catching our breath because there was so much movement there in the 60s after Vatican II, beloved Pope John the 23rd, that whole movement of getting to know one another. I think that what happened with a lot of Christians in North America when Vatican II happened is kind of what Kinley experienced over in Estonia. That emotion, well, wow, there's something that brings us together.
Right.
And we got so excited. And then maybe that plateau you described is where we are, and we want to talk a little bit more about that. Where do we go from here? When do we catch our breath and get back into it, and how can we? What are some of the ways? Because I think it's a justifiable question that people ask is, why are there so many of you Christians? And some of that is just plain ignorance, but then how can we get them to the point to realize that that kind of diversity does not mean that we are not unified? Right. Ray Kaiser, you come out of an ecumenical background, actually, Yale Divinity School, PhD from there, but also out of West Virginia, is that right?
Yes.
Talk to us a little bit about your experience. Jim has shared his experience. How about you?
Well, I explain to people sometimes that I am a Methodist by virtue of an ecumenical merger of my parents. My mother grew up Russian Orthodox, a child of immigrants from Eastern Europe. And my father grew up in the mountains of Virginia, a primitive Baptist. And when they were married, they decided they wanted to find a place where they both felt that they could be comfortable and belong, and they found the local Methodist church in Welch, West Virginia, my hometown. And in that particular setting, I think I was fortunate to experience a lot of interchurch cooperation. In fact, we had 4 churches physically clustered right next to one another. The Catholic Church and the Methodist Church were about 10 feet apart from each other physically. I can remember a significant time in my youth when I went through major surgery and was very critically ill for several weeks. There were prayer circles formed all around the town, and I was told that my Catholic friends, for example, had requested a Mass be said for me. And so there was a lot of interfaith support, interchurch support going on, and I think that happens for people in the pews, that there is this experience of Christian unity even though we have these different denominational labels, that perhaps even more so that's the case today, that we have a generation of people coming into churches for whom denominational labels are not as important as the experience in a particular location for them of what is their expression of Christianity.
There is a writer, Lyle Schaller,
yes.
Have you heard of him before, who talks about the fact that in this day and time in which we live, the 90s, that those denominational labels are not important to people, that they look around and shop to try to find a place. I'm one of those Christians who likes to think that those denominational labels are important because they give a sense of identity to people, and they tell us who we are and where we come from, but not in a sense of dividing people. It seems to me there's kind of a common call we have, and maybe you were fortunate in Welch, West Virginia, to realize through the leadership of a pastor, of that common calling that you had as a youngster, and then to have Roman Catholic friends whose building where they worship was 10 feet from you, and when you're sick they pray for you. Ray, you're fortunate. You're going to be a bishop someday leading all of us, you see.
I don't know about that. I do think that part of the plateau that we were talking about earlier may also be a factor of what you were just talking about, the need to also take some time to rediscover what some of the distinctive and unique features are of various churches and traditions and expressions, and a concern not to lose those and not to lose sight of the significance of some of the differences. But nonetheless, we, I think, are growing both in terms of clergy experience with one another and the church's lay experiences in various programs. I think we were talking about Stephen Ministry as a caregiving ministry in local churches that is organized across denominational lines and that is bringing lay people of various churches together in the common interest for the kind of ministry they're doing in their local congregation.
What I'm wondering also, Ray, is what do we do on the local level? What Kinley did with the choir, you know, that's mega stuff. That's a big experience, a dramatic experience. how do we take that type of excitement that he experienced over there and say, in 1993, people of faith of the Christian community need to revitalize ourselves, to share together in ministry. And I think one of the jumping off places would be common servanthood. The first thing Kinley's group did, if I understand your story right, Kinley, is that you looked at what are the needs of the people of Estonia and how can we reach out with pharmaceutical supplies, how can we reach out with commentaries, Bibles, Christian education supplies. Maybe that's something that we need to think about. Well, have you had that experience, Jim?
Yeah, it comes to mind in Toronto, which of course I was there for 8 years, and that's quite in contrast with Texas in terms of the weather. And a particularly hard winter, there was a concern about the homeless people and transients especially. And there were shelters and so on, but the problem was during the daytime. They needed something. And because we had come together as churches in this area of Toronto, we were able to very quickly provide. There was one church that had the best facilities for doing this, but they had other commitments. At the church I was at, we accepted some of their groups. We said, okay, you come over and be with us for the rest of the winter, which opened that space. And we were able to set up a daycare, basically a daycare center where transients could come, have a warm lunch, spend the day until they went back to the shelter in the evening. But
That's
I think,
exciting stuff.
you know, the fact that we had already been in place,
Right.
you know, we were able to move quickly on that. And I think that's the great advantages of the churches being together, that as issues come up or crises come up, they can react to it.
You know what the lay people often say is that you clergy just sit around and talk all the time. Isn't that what you say, Kinley, about us? You know, we clergy just sit around.
Right.
You just talk about this unity and this togetherness, but nothing happens. When we come back, we're going to take a break and talk about Austin Metropolitan Ministry to this break. But after the break, let's talk about some ways that we can do some of the things locally here. And then, Kinley, you come in and talk to us a little bit more about what your experience was spiritually, and members of the group, of what you experienced from the Christians in Estonia. Stay with us. We want you to continue this discussion on unity within the Christian faith.
Serving Austin means serving you. That has always been the primary goal of Austin Metropolitan Ministries. We are religion in action through the work of these organizations. Each plays a key role in making the capital city a better place to live, but we can't do it alone. Do you have some spare time, talents, or any resources that you can share? If you do, please call AMM at 472-7627, because serving Austin means serving you.
Welcome back to Austin Faith Dialogue. We're talking today with Ray Kaiser of United Methodist Church in Northwest Hills and Kinley Lang of Covenant Presbyterian here in Austin and Jim McCabe of St. Austin's Parish. We're talking about unity among Christians here in the Austin community, but also with Kinley, unity with Christians in Estonia. And we're talking about how we can go about doing that and doing something tangible. Austin Metropolitan Ministries focuses on inter-Christian dialogue, and has both of you are on that group, that inter-Christian dialogue group. Talk about some of the things that Austin Metropolitan Ministries tries to foster and encourage so that people who are watching this program might say to their clergy and their community of faith, are we involved in it? What are some of the things that happen through AMM?
Well, for example, I've participated in a group of clergy who gather occasionally for some sharing, and the format has been very simple for individual clergy to share some biographical faith journey information for us to begin to find common links with one another. AMM has also supported regional clusters within the city, and our church is part of a cluster of a variety of churches in Northwest Austin that have gotten together on a regular basis. In particular, we cooperate with one another at the Lenten season. Kinley and his choir was singing in our sanctuary, for example, just last spring. And we are hoping, I think, that there will be more that comes out of that kind of common experience. I believe that there is room for us to find common mission objectives that a variety of churches might support, and many churches are doing that sort of thing here in the city. We find that there are things that we cannot do individually. They're too big for any one congregation or even a particular denominational group. And so we work together to help that come about. In another city in San Antonio, where I served another church, churches were working together to provide assistance ministries and a common shelter for the homeless. And I think there are greater possibilities for that kind of cooperation here in Austin.
If a member of your congregation would come in and say to you, Pastor, I'm troubled. I'm troubled because it seems that we are kind of on a course all our own. We're not in a sense of unity, that there's a one Holy Catholic Church, this unity. Well, how would you direct them? What would you do to them? Where would you start with that type of parishioner who says that I want to experience more unity with other people of faith? Where would you go, Jim? How would you talk to that parishioner?
I guess I would encourage that person to try, first of all, learn about the variants, because and I guess maybe it depends on where the person was coming from. But first of all, to see the areas in which we have agreement, and of course on a national level there have been a number of theological statements in terms of agreement on baptism and Eucharist and so on. And so I think to have a sense of that, first of all, because I don't think a lot of lay people realize that.
Hasn't there been through the years a change? And Kinley, you have to jump into this. Here we have some theologians here talking. You might say this is ping pong going back and forth, but hasn't there been a change, for instance, on the view of baptism, that we are more and more respecting within the Christian faith each other's baptisms? Isn't that right, Bill?
I believe that's so. The position in the United Methodist Church has been for many years now that we recognize any baptism in the name of Jesus Christ by any denomination or group, and that we welcome new members of our church first as members of Christ's Holy Church, and then to the congregation of the United Methodist Church, that we recognize our denomination, our particular name branch, shall we say, is a subset of something larger, that is the Church of Jesus Christ. And that's been a position that we've held for a number of years.
Let me try something on you, Jim. I think that this means that we have to learn to trust one another. And if we can get to that place, whether we're in Baltimore, and you and I both love Baltimore, or Toronto, or New York City, or Burnet, Texas, or Austin, that people of faith of the Christian community can learn to trust. And that's what I was wondering, Kinley, when you went over to Estonia, was there a feeling, those people have gone through wretched times, and they have been under both the Nazi regime and then the communist regime, and you come with your choir from Austin, Texas. Was there kind of a feeling of trust between you as you shared the commonality of love for music?
It was amazingly immediate, Carl. Once we shook hands with these people and looked in each other's eyes, there was an immediate connection that amazed me. I can't imagine a more diverse cultural background, comparing the background I had and the way those Christians have grown up and lived. It's as diverse as I can imagine, and yet there was an immediate connection. And one of the sources of excitement about that for me and for my choir was that I'm not proud to admit this, but I think it's easy to fall into imagining that the Christian experience is in our sanctuary,
yes,
or at least it's in this group of churches that we know of. But when we went 10,000 miles from home, it was exactly the same, and it gave us a feeling of being a part of something much, much larger than we normally think of.
Maybe we need to then share with those people of faith of the Christian community that the faith is larger, not only your own congregation, but your own personal experience, that it involves the experiences of people around the world, and that as leaders, either vocally or theologically in worship, to hold that up in front of people, that the communion is really worldwide, isn't it? And that we share that worldwide. And your experience, which many of us will never have, of going someplace far away and singing, what about that worship experience? You sang, and we saw the beautiful cathedral where you sang, but was there prayer? Was there a reading of Scripture? Was it a worship experience, or was it simply a concert?
No, we involved ourselves in their worship. And we sang with their choir, we sang the hymns with their congregation, we prayed with them, And there was not one moment of thinking, a feeling that it was unusual or out of place or different. We immediately were connected with their worship experience as if we'd grown up with them. It was one of the sources of delight about the experience.
See, that to me is mystery, huh?
Yeah,
Jim, how do you relate
really
to that?
is, yeah. When I combat that sense of baptism as a unifying factor, I mean, that's, you know, the one Lord, one faith, one baptism. And like in the Methodist Church, in Roman Catholic Church, we do accept the baptisms in other Christian churches. And even in where a person might choose to affiliate with the Roman Catholic Church, there's very much now a play down. In other words, if a person has already been baptized, the ceremony is just very simply an acknowledgement of entering into the Catholic communion.
You know, one of the criticisms I've heard about Christians through the years is that you go around proselyting one another. You try to get numbers, you know, the scalp type of idea. You know, how many did you get this week? And I think that's really changed. I think that the ecumenical spirit of the last couple of decades has moved us past that kind of thinking, where we are doing this affirmation of one another. At Yale Divinity School, you had kind of that experience, didn't you, Ray?
Well, certainly there was a tremendous sense of cooperation and a growing understanding that people across denominations and across a variety of experiences have so much more in common with one another than they might have first assumed, and that there are actually as many differences among people within the same church grouping as there are differences between different church denominations. I believe that the Holy Spirit's at work among us no matter what we try to do about it to create disunity, that the fruit of the Spirit is unity. Paul tells us that, and that we will discover that happening among us, whether the denominations and the hierarchies are supporting it or not, that people are moving in that direction.
One of my concerns is that people will think that unity is uniformity. Right. And I delight in the fact that what you experienced in Estonia was unity, but there was a difference there too. You said culturally different people, but yet a sense of unity. And if we can take what Kinley and his choir there at Covenant Presbyterian experienced and bring that back to the United States and hold that up in our congregational life, what's something else that we could share with the Austin Faith Dialogue viewers in closing? What would be your hope and prayer, Jim, for a sense of unity among the Christian community?
Well, I guess my hope would be that we would grow closer together, that in that growing we would have that respect for the differences. I think that's one of the key things is respect, because so often in the past we lacked that, and if you didn't conform, then it was just rejected, and that was outright.
Maybe that's where we need to pull it all together and say, as we respect one another as fellow believers, then we can join with Kinley and his choir in singing praise and experiencing that emotion of unity and oneness. Ray Kaiser, God bless you in the ministry of Northwest Hills United Methodist, and Kinley, my friend, good to be with you again.
Thank you.
God bless the work at Covenant Presbyterian. And Jim, we're glad you're in Austin and at St. Austin's Parish, and thank you for being. And for all of you watching Austin Faith Dialogue, remember we are a part of a world community of faith. God bless that unity that we share together. Thank you for watching Austin Faith Dialogue.
For more information, call Austin Metropolitan Ministries at 472-7627.